Hello, I'm Mariam Mashiri, live in the Qatari capital Doha. It's day 20 of the US-Israel war with Iran. And over the next 10 or so minutes, we'll bring you our special programme. Let's start with some of the key developments of the day. Energy prices surge after strikes hit part of the world's largest natural gas field shared between Iran and Qatar. Donald Trump says he had no knowledge of the strike and wants Israel not to do it again. But Iran responds, damaging energy plants in several Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel acted alone in striking the Iranian gas field and insists President Trump was not dragged into the war by Israel. A US fighter jet was forced to make an emergency landing at a US base in the Middle East after flying over Iran. Iranian authorities are claiming they struck the jet and say it was seriously damaged. And authorities in Lebanon say more than 1,000 people have now been killed as a result of Israeli strikes on the country. Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah strongholds. Well, the price of oil and gas has soared today, the result of an Israeli strike on a key gas facility in Iran and retaliatory Iranian strikes on oil and gas facilities across the Gulf. These strikes have shocked the global markets. The price of Brent crude, seen as the market benchmark, spiked at $119 per barrel earlier today. That's its highest point since the war began. Gas prices, meanwhile, in the UK climbed over 20% before settling at around 13% higher. Our BBC Verify correspondent Ben Chu explains why the gas field shared by Qatar and Iran is so important. Well, before we hear from Ben Chu, let's go to the markets, because following the markets from New York is our North America business correspondent, Samira Hussain. And Samira, how much of an impact have these latest strikes on energy infrastructure in the Gulf had on markets around the world?
It has had quite a significant impact because it's not just about the current supply chains, right? So a lot of the moves on oil markets that we have been seeing over the last several days have to do with current supplies, getting the oil out from the Gulf and getting it into Asia and into Europe. But what these attacks on the Qatari energy infrastructure has done is that it's really crippled capability down the line. So now we're not talking about just a supply issue, but we're actually now talking about an issue of getting the actual oil out. And we know that we've heard from the Qataris that have said it's going to be several weeks before these operations are back online. And also some other Gulf countries are hesitant about even bringing some of their energy facilities back online until the threat is gone. So we're moving away now dangerously from a supply issue to this being a much bigger sort of long-term issue with supplying the world with energy supplies.
Thank you. Well, the US Secretary of Defense says the US is on plan and on target in the war with Iran. But speaking earlier, Pete Hegseth gave little detail on how the US was going to tackle some of the key issues in the war, such as the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. There are also questions about the strength of the US-Israeli partnership after the US president said he had no warning of an Israeli strike that hit Iran's South Pass gas field. Well, speaking at the White House, Donald Trump warned the Israeli Prime Minister not to attack any more of Iran's energy infrastructure.
I did. I told him don't do that, and he won't do that. We didn't discuss. You know, we do. We're independent. We get along great. It's coordinated, but on occasion he'll do something, and if I don't like it, and so we're not doing that anymore.
Well, that's the view from the US, and in the last hour, the Israeli Prime Minister has said Israel acted alone in that strike on Iran's natural gas field. Let's go to Israel and join our Middle East analyst in Jerusalem, Sebastian Usher. Sebastian, what else has Benjamin Netanyahu been saying?
Well, he pursued that line, particularly because the attack on the South Pass gas field, because of the effect it's had on the oil markets, has been seen by many people, by analysts, as potentially showing a divergence between Israeli and US interests. And Mr. Netanyahu is very keen to say that that's fake news, that there's no divergence between them, and also this idea that Israel somehow dragging the US into the war and subsequently into other engagements within it, that is absolutely not true. He said that there is no way that President Trump is that kind of man who could be told what to do, that he knows what to do. So I think Mr. Netanyahu was very mindful of the way that this has been portrayed, the relationship between the two countries in the past 24 hours, and really trying to reassert this idea that the two countries are acting absolutely together. I mean, he started this news conference with a lengthy address in Hebrew, essentially to the Israeli people, thanking them for their steadfastness, for their resilience. Again, of course, there have been barrages of missiles and drones on a daily basis. There have been casualties, there have been deaths here. Just a few hours ago, a fragment of an Iranian missile hit an oil facility in the northern city of Haifa. Now, the Israeli authorities are saying that has caused no significant disruption, but it's a sign that Israel is to some extent still vulnerable from the response by Iran. So he was thanking the Israeli people for that and saying that he would not, his government would not, the Israeli military would not be able to do what they're doing now if it didn't have that support. I think when he turned to English, and both in the address that he gave there, the remarks he made before he answered questions, but then in some of the answers he gave, he was essentially calling on the world to show similar steadfastness, saying, you know, there's a short-sighted view about what's happening, that, you know, the suggestion that the goals aren't being reached, that the problems that the war has raised are worse than what Israel and the US are trying to fix. And absolutely, as he's done many times, but in very strong language again, denying that that's the case, that the threat that Iran has posed, and that he acknowledged he has been warning about for decades, that was of such intensity that it had to be dealt with, and that the world must understand that. So I think asking for the same kind of forbearance from the world, I think that will be very more difficult for him to be able to obtain than, for the moment, the public support here in Israel.
Sebastian, thank you. Well, as with any conflict, there is, of course, a human impact to consider. For the first time since Iran began retaliating to the joint US and Israeli action, there have been Palestinian fatalities in the West Bank. 3 Palestinian women were killed after a beauty salon in the Israeli-occupied West Bank was hit by an Iranian missile. Our Middle East correspondent Yolan Nell sent this from the scene near Hebron.
This is the nail salon where these Palestinian women were killed last night. They were the first Palestinians to be killed as a direct result of the Iran war here in the occupied West Bank. There is a crater just over here where people have been telling us that a bomb or part of a bomb landed, then ricocheted off. You can see the damage to the back of the door for the nail salon, and then all over the floor there's blood, there's makeup, there are nail extensions.
The entrance of the prison.
Inside, the woman who was doing the nails was killed, along with 2 of her customers from the village of Beit Awa, and a number of people who were just waiting outside also were injured. And they had gathered here to get ready for the Eid al-Fitr holiday to have their beauty treatments. Now, people in the village have been saying that there are no warning sirens that go off in the Palestinian areas as there are in the Israeli settlements when there's incoming Iranian missile fire. And they have no protected shelters to go to here. And people are very worried that something like this could happen again.
Yolan Nell. Well, as well as marking 3 weeks since the start of the war, many inside Iran will mark Nowruz on Friday. The Persian New Year signals the start of spring and of new beginnings. Celebrations inside Iran and among the Iranian diaspora around the world will undoubtedly be muted this year. Despite the difficulties in communication within Iran, though, BBC Persian has heard from ordinary Iranians keen to share their thoughts from inside the country on the eve of Nowruz. The following are voice notes spoken by colleagues from BBC Persian.
I'm in Tehran, the city center. People don't have much cheer. They're anxious, and they jump at the sound of even a petrol-powered motorbike. But life keeps flowing. And little by little, we are learning how to live in the middle of a war. We go out of house only for essential tasks, but every time before closing the door, we glance inside with a sense of sorrow. Perhaps by the time we return, the house won't be there. Or perhaps we won't come back ourselves.
Until last night I was in Tehran. In the areas I passed through, the city didn't feel anything like the normal build-up to Nowruz. There is no sign of the usual pre-holiday atmosphere. No energy, no excitement. It truly feels like a war-stricken city. But in the provinces further north, it feels completely different. Almost like a place untouched by war. Life there seems normal. People are out shopping for Nowruz, and it's extremely crowded. But overall, no one's heart is at ease.
This year just doesn't feel like Nowruz at all. The internet is down, phone connection come and go, and it's just constant news about war. Maybe one day, when all of this over, we will be able to celebrate properly and make up for all these days.
Tomorrow marks 3 weeks since the start of this conflict. One that, as a result of US and Israeli strikes, has so far claimed the lives of over 1,300 civilians in Iran and over 1,000 people in Lebanon. Iranian retaliatory strikes have killed 14 in Israel and 3 in the West Bank. 13 US service members have also been killed. On the last day of February, Donald Trump described the joint US-Israeli operation as a noble mission, one that would give the Iranian people a once-in-a-generation chance to take over their government. Operation Epic Fury, as the US labelled it, would remove the imminent threats to US national security and put an end to activities that endanger America's allies. But 20 days into this war, it seems the threats to US partners in the region have only grown. The US Defense Secretary said today the world should be thanking Donald Trump. US objectives, he said, are on track, but Iran's ability to hit crucial energy infrastructure in the Gulf draws into greater focus claims by Washington that the US is winning decisively. Then, of course, there's the American alliance with Israel. Is an Israeli strike on Iran's main natural gas field the first split between Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Trump? While the White House said they had no knowledge of the attack, an Israeli official told the BBC today there was no daylight between Israel and the US. And what about Iran? The regime in Tehran is undoubtedly weakened, but remains intact. American and Israeli bombing has not drawn Iranians to rise up against the Republic, as Donald Trump might have hoped. Instead, Iranians have told the BBC Persian service of quiet streets as many in Tehran shelter indoors. The regime seems resilient, more than many predicted, and perhaps emboldened, vowing to fight on. While the US says the war will end when they say it's over, the questions of when, how, and what the lasting effects will be remain unknown. Whether you're joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or TV, thank you so much for your time. We're back at the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.